The man had been walking since before the sun cleared the canyon rim. His boots were wrong for walking, built for stirrups, not caliche roads, and the leather had split along the left sole sometime in the night. So each step pressed the grit of the Llano Estacado directly against the heel of his foot. He did not stop to mind it. There was nothing left in him that minded things. He had used up that particular luxury somewhere back along the stretch of highway between Amarillo and nowhere. When the truck that had given him a ride pulled off without warning and left him standing in a plume of diesel smoke with 47 cents in his front pocket and a bedroll so old the canvas had gone. The color of old bone. His name was Cole Drennan. He was 41 years old. He had once owned 600 head of cattle, 3 working horses, a good dog, and a deed to land his grandfather had broken his back to earn. He owned none of those things now. The bank had seen to the cattle. The drought had seen to the horses. The dog had followed a neighboring rancher's kids home one afternoon, and Cole, in a moment of honesty so raw it had surprised even himself, had let it go. He had nothing to offer the animal. What he was walking toward, he could not have said with precision. West, mostly. Away from creditors and pity and the particular silence of a town that watches a man fall and calls it justice. Then he saw the gate. It hung open at a 45-degree angle, one hinge rusted entirely free of its post. The other one holding on with the grim stubbornness of something that had given up everything but the last of itself. Beyond it, a dirt road cut through tall, yellowed grass toward a low ranch house with a tin roof throwing back the morning light like hammered brass. A hand-painted sign on the gate post read, "Duval Property, Private." He almost kept walking. Then he heard the sound, a child crying, low and exhausted. The kind of crying that had been going on long enough that the child barely remembered what it had started for, and something in Cole Drennan's chest moved that had not moved in a long time. He turned through the broken gate and walked up the road toward the house. If this story already has you feeling something, hit that subscribe button right now and ring that bell so you never miss what comes next. Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now, settle in, because this one is going to stay with you. The woman who answered the door was not what he expected, though Cole could not have said afterward what exactly he had expected. She was perhaps 35, with dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested she had done it in the dark and not checked a mirror since. She wore a canvas work shirt 2 sizes too large, and her hands, when they gripped the doorframe, were the hands of someone who had been doing manual labor without adequate help for a very long time. Her eyes were the color of creek water after a storm. Suspicious. Exhausted. Alert in the way that only people who have stopped trusting easily can be alert. Behind her, pressed against the shadow of the hallway, were 2 children. A girl of perhaps 8, with her mother's dark hair and a bruise along her jaw that was fading to yellow at the edges. A boy of 5 or 6 who was holding a wooden spoon as though he had been using it and had simply forgotten to set it down. "Whatever you're selling," the woman said, "I haven't got money for it." "I'm not selling anything," Cole said. "I heard a child crying." She looked at him for a long moment. He did not look away. He was too tired to perform anything, guilt, menace, want. He just stood there in his broken boot with the morning light cutting across the side of his face like a judgment. "You look like you haven't eaten," she said finally. "That's an accurate observation. Can you work?" He looked past her at the ranch, what he could see of it. The fence line that had gone 3 posts down on the eastern side. The barn door hanging open with a broken latch. A water trough with a crack running along its base, a slow leak darkening the earth beneath it into a circle of mud. He could see the work in everything, the way a man who has ranched all his life can see the shape of a thing by its decay. "Yes," he said. Her name was Nora Duval. Her husband, she told him, without particular ceremony, as though stating whether, had died 7 months prior. Kicked by a horse. He had lingered for days and then he had not. The bank held a partial note on the property. The note was 90 days past due. She had $112 in a coffee can behind the flour, and she had not told another living person that. She told Cole Drennan inside of 10 minutes, standing in her own kitchen, and she seemed mildly surprised at herself for doing it. "Sit down," she said. The kitchen was a study in managed chaos. Dishes stacked with a system only their owner understood. Dried herbs hanging from a low beam, some of them so old they had lost their color and held only the ghost of their smell. A cast iron skillet on the stove that had not been properly seasoned in some time. 2 cups without handles. A window above the sink with a cracked pane held together by a careful application of pine pitch. Nora put a pot of pinto beans on the stove, they had been soaking overnight, and began to fry salt pork in the skillet. The smell of it hitting hot iron filled the kitchen immediately, dense and serious, and Cole watched the boy's posture change at the smell. His small shoulders dropped half an inch. The wooden spoon went down on the table. Cole asked if he could do something. Nora pointed at a basket of onions near the door. He found a knife, a good one, he noted, carbon steel, well used, and he took the onions to the table and began to peel and slice them in the way his own mother had taught him, thin half-moons. Consistent, the kind of cutting that shows a man has done it 10,000 times and does not need to think about it anymore. The girl watched him from the doorway of the hall. "What happened to your boot?" she asked. "Wore it out," he said. "Daddy had boots like that. He wore them out too." "It's what boots are for," Cole said. She considered this with the seriousness of someone to whom the world had recently demonstrated that it required serious consideration. Then she came into the kitchen and sat at the table 3 feet from him and began to wind a piece of twine around her fingers in an elaborate, purposeless pattern. Her name was June. The boy was called Whitaker, which was his father's mother's maiden name, but everyone called him Whit. They ate at the table with no ceremony. Nora set down bowls of beans thick with the pork and onion, a plate of cornbread that had baked while they talked, a jar of pepper vinegar for the beans. Cole ate with the focus of a man who had not had a cooked meal in 4 days. He did not apologize for his hunger. He did not perform gratitude in a way that would have made it awkward. He ate, and when he was finished he set down his spoon and said, "That's a good pot of beans." "They're plain beans," Nora said. "Plain beans cooked right are better than fancy food cooked wrong," he said. "I've had proof of that on both sides." For the first time, something moved briefly across her face that was not exhaustion or weariness. It was not quite a smile. It was the territory just adjacent to one. After the meal, without being asked, Cole washed the dishes. He heated water on the stove, found the soap, and washed every dish in the stack. Nora stood in the doorway to the kitchen watching him for a moment, then went outside. When she came back in, she was carrying the broken hinge from the gate. "I don't have the hardware to fix it," she said. "You've got a smith in town." "Haskell's. 2 miles east on the county road." "I'll go tomorrow," he said. "Tonight I can wedge it so it won't swing in the wind." She looked at him for the 3rd careful time that day. Then she nodded once, the way people nod when they've decided something they're not entirely sure of yet. That night, Cole slept in the barn on a canvas drop cloth he'd found folded over a sawhorse. The hay was old but dry. A cat he hadn't seen during the day came and settled near his feet sometime in the small hours, and the weight of it, slight as it was enough. The next 2 weeks moved at the pace of ranch work, which is to say they were long and unglamorous and accumulated the way honest labor always does, invisibly. Until one morning you look at what you've built and realize it happened while you were too tired to notice. Cole fixed the gate hinge first, trading an afternoon of fence mending for credit at Haskell's Hardware. He reseated the barn latch with a length of flat iron and a borrowed drill brace. He patched the water trough with a mixture of mortar and river clay he packed in wet and let cure for 3 days. Watching it with something like anxiety until the ring of moisture around the base stopped spreading and then began, slowly, to retreat. We'd followed him for most of it. The boy said very little. He was the kind of quiet that comes not from shyness but from profound attention. He watched Cole's hands the way a student watches a teacher, cataloging each motion with large, serious eyes. On the 3rd day, Cole handed him the smaller hammer and pointed at a loose board on the corral fence and showed him how to set a nail, 3 taps to seat it, 1 firm strike to drive it. The wrist doing the work, not the arm. Whit drove 6 nails that afternoon. 4 of them went in clean. Cole said nothing about the other 2. He pulled them, reset them, and handed the hammer back. Whit drove them again. Both went clean. The boy looked at the fence board with an expression Cole recognized, the specific satisfaction of a thing made right by your own hands. Good, Cole said. Whit nodded as though he had been told something he already knew but had needed confirmed. June was different. She came at him sideways, the way smart, hurt children do. She would not speak to him directly but would position herself nearby and conduct elaborate operations that required his peripheral attention. She repaired a split in the chicken coop wire using a method that was entirely incorrect but showed a complete understanding of the problem. Cole watched her work, said nothing, then later, after she was gone, redid the repair with the same wire, correctly, leaving her original attempt visible at the edge so she could see what he had changed and why. The next morning she came and looked at it for a long time. By the end of the 2nd week, she was asking him questions. 40 miles east, in the town of Riata Crossing, a man named Joel Stott sat in the back room of a law office that smelled of old paper and pipe smoke and made a phone call to a man in Amarillo. Stott was Nora Duval's brother-in-law. He was also the man who held a secondary lien on the Duval property, a document signed in a moment of desperation by Nora's late husband, Cade Duval, during the worst year of the drought. When the cattle were dying and the primary bank was threatening. The lien entitled Stott to a claim on the property if the mortgage went unpaid for more than 90 days. The mortgage had been unpaid for 97 days when Stott made his call. The man in Amarillo was a lawyer named Hedrick who specialized in the kind of quiet legal pressure that looks, from the outside, like paperwork. "She's still out there?" Hedrick asked. "As of Friday," Stott said. "And she's got someone helping her now. Drifter of some kind. I don't know where she found him." "Doesn't matter," Hedrick said. "The lien's the lien. A drifter can't change what's written." "I want to do this correctly," Stott said, which meant he wanted it to be legal enough that no one could attach his name to the ugliness of it. "Give me 2 weeks," Hedrick said. "And don't do anything that makes noise." Stott hung up the phone and looked out the window at the main street of Riata Crossing, the feed store, the diner, the post office, the beauty parlor with a hand-painted daisy on the glass. He had grown up in this town. He knew how it worked. How information moved. How a reputation, carefully managed, could turn public sentiment the way a river turns at a hard rock, naturally, without visible force. He picked up his hat, set it on his head, and went to have lunch at the diner, where he knew the right people would be at this time of day. Nora drove the truck into town on a Thursday because the flour was low and Whit had developed a cough that she wanted a pharmacist's opinion on. She brought both children and, after a moment's consideration at the gate, she brought Cole. Because the truck needed an eye kept on it and she did not want to leave him at the ranch while she was gone. Though she could not have said precisely why the second reason carried more weight than the first. Main Street in Hatchet Creek, the nearest town to the Duval property. Not Riata Crossing, was the kind of town that had been medium-sized in 1955 and had been contracting gently ever since without fully acknowledging the fact. The feed store was real. The diner was real. The rest of it had the provisional quality of things that survive by habit. Nora left Cole with the truck and took the children into the pharmacy, where a stout woman named Mrs. Beaumont presided over the counter with the authority of someone who has been the first to know everything in a small town for 30 years. Mrs. Beaumont looked at Whit's throat, confirmed it was not serious, recommended honey and willow bark tea, and charged Nora 60 cents for a small paper bag of horehound drops because she believed in the value of something sweet when a child was unwell. Then she folded her hands on the counter and said, in the tone of someone doing a great favor, "Nora, people are talking." "People always are," Nora said. "About the man at your place. He works the ranch. He sleeps there." "He sleeps in the barn," Nora said, and her voice had gone to the temperature of well water. "Which is where ranch hands sleep, Mrs. Beaumont, as I expect you know." A ranch hand you're paying wages to is one thing. A drifter with no name and no history is another. His name is Cole Drennan. He's from Childress County. He ranched there for 16 years before the bank took it. He can fix a fence, pull a calf if he has to, and he doesn't drink. That's considerably more than I can say about the last two men who offered to help me. Mrs. Beaumont's chin drew back approximately half an inch. Well, she said. Well, Nora agreed, and picked up the horehound drops and the willow bark and her children and went out. Cole was leaning against the truck when she came out. He'd spent the time doing nothing, just standing in the shade of the building, watching the street the way men who have been in many towns watch them. He saw things. The way the feed store owner nodded at certain men and not others. The way the woman crossing the street with a basket looked at the truck, then at him, then looked away too quickly. The shape of the social architecture of a place revealed itself quickly to a man with nothing to do but observe. He had also been approached. While Nora was in the pharmacy, a man in a clean white shirt had come and stood beside him with the casual inevitability of someone who has planned an interaction and is now executing it. "That's Nora Duval's truck," the man said. "Is it?" Cole said. "You working for her?" "That's one way to put it." "I'm Gerald Stott," the man said. "I was married to her husband's sister before she passed." Cole looked at him for the first time. Stott was broad across the shoulders with soft hands and careful eyes. The kind of man who had never been in an actual fight but understood the mechanics of harm. "Cole Drennan," Cole said. "Where you from, Mr. Drennan?" "Most recently, nowhere particular." Stott smiled with only his mouth. "Well, I'd hate for you to get settled in somewhere that isn't going to hold. If you understand my meaning." "I generally find that plain speaking is clearer than meaning," Cole said. Stott's smile held for a moment longer than it wanted to, then released. "The property has some legal complexities," he said. "It might not be Nora's to operate much longer. I'd hate for someone in your situation to put work into something and have it come to nothing." "I've put work into things before," Cole said. "It doesn't always come to nothing." Stott looked at him, recalibrating. Then he nodded, a different kind of nod than Nora's, the kind that holds a threat inside it the way a rock holds cold, and walked away. When Nora came out, Cole told her, word for word, what Stott had said. She stood with her hand on the truck door and listened to all of it and did not interrupt. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "He holds a lien," she said. "Cade signed it when the drought was worst. I didn't know about it until after the funeral." "How long has he been waiting on it?" "Long enough that he thinks the waiting is over." She opened the truck door. "Get in." Cole got in. June was already in the cab, reading a library book with the concentration of someone who has learned that books are reliable in a way that other things are not. Whit was in the truck bed with his small boots hanging over the tailgate. They drove home in the particular silence of people who have just been shown the shape of a problem and have not yet decided how to face it. That night, after the children were in bed, Nora put the coffee on and spread a set of papers on the kitchen table, the mortgage document, the lien, a letter from the primary bank, and the deed itself. Cole sat across from her and read each document the way he had once read contracts for cattle sales, slowly, for the language inside the language. "The lien triggers at 90 days past due on the primary note," he said. "Which I'm past." "By how much?" 11 days. Cole was quiet for a moment. "What was the mortgage payment?" $240. He was quiet again, looking at the deed. Then he said, "Do you have anything that's fully yours?" "No lien, no note." "The deed has my name on it," she said. "Along with Cade's." "But they say that's not." "No," he said. "The deed itself." "The instrument. Is it in your possession?" She looked at him. Then she got up and went to the bedroom and came back with a metal lockbox, and inside the lockbox, beneath an old photograph and 2 letters she didn't let him see, was the original deed. He held it in both hands and read it slowly, and something in his face shifted in the way that stone shifts when the right pressure finds the right place. "There's a provision here," he said. "An old one. Pre-bank. It says that the property can only be transferred or liened with the signature of both named parties on the primary deed." He set it down. "Did your husband sign the lien agreement?" "Yes." "Were you named on that agreement?" She stopped. "I.e. no. Kate handled it." "I wasn't there." Cole looked at the lien. Then back at the deed. "Then the lien may not be valid," he said. "If the deed requires dual consent and you were never party to the secondary instrument." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the wind moved through the high grass with the sound of someone breathing carefully. "We'd need a lawyer," she said. "Yes," he said. "A real one." He had begun sleeping lighter. It was not a decision he'd made consciously, it was the body's old response to a place becoming worth protecting. He had felt it before, in the early years on his own land, when the cattle were young and the coyotes were bold, and he'd learned to come fully awake at sounds that the surface of sleep couldn't name. The cat always told him something before he heard it himself. It was 12 nights after the trip to town when the cat went rigid near his feet and then was gone in the darkness between one breath and the next. Cole lay still for 4 seconds, then rose without sound. He had put his boots, mended now, with a strip of boot leather he'd found in the barn, and stitched himself, beside the drop cloth each night since the 2nd week. He put them on in the dark by feel alone. He took the rifle from the wall hooks he'd put up himself, a .30-06, Nora's, a plain gun with good iron sights, and he went to the barn door and stood behind it rather than in it and listened. The night was what West Texas nights are in October, cold and enormous, the sky so full of stars they created a kind of low, blue-gray ambient light that was just enough to see shapes. The main house was dark. The wind had gone flat. In that flatness, Cole heard what the cat had heard, footsteps in the tall grass along the eastern fence, slow and deliberate, and then the low creak of the gate, the repaired gate, with its good hinge, which someone was opening carefully rather than leaning on. 2 shapes came through the gate. One large, one medium. They moved toward the barn first, which told Cole they'd been sent to look and report, not to act directly. Scouts. He let them get to the barn door, let them get close enough that when he stepped out from behind it, they were already too committed to run without tangling in each other. "Stop," he said. They stopped. In the starlight, he could see their faces. Boys, almost early 20s, both of them, wearing the look of men who've been hired and have not yet calculated the full cost of what they agreed to. "Who sent you?" Cole said. It was not a question. The larger one found his voice first. "We were just, don't," Cole said. "I'll tell you what I already know. You're from Riata Crossing. Gerald Stott paid you something to come out here and see what's what. Maybe take a look at the house, the papers inside if you could get to them, report back." "Am I wrong?" The smaller one looked at the larger one. "Put your hands where I can see them and turn around," Cole said. "Both of you." They did. "I'm going to give you one thing to carry back," Cole said. "Tell whoever sent you that this property is occupied, that it is defended, and that the deed question is already in the hands of a lawyer in Lubbock." That last part was not yet true. But it would be by week's end. "And tell him that if anyone comes onto this land again at night without an invitation, I will consider it a threat against the children who sleep in that house. And I take threats against children with a seriousness that is difficult to overstate. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," the smaller one said. "Go on," Cole said. They went. He stood in the barn door and listened until he could no longer hear their boots in the grass, and for several minutes after that. Then he heard the house door. Nora came across the yard carrying a lamp turned so low it was more suggestion than light. She had a coat over her nightgown and her hair was down, and in the near darkness she looked younger. Or older, he couldn't have said which, with the look of someone who has heard enough to understand the situation without needing it explained. "2 of them," Cole said. She nodded. "I saw from the window." You were watching. I don't sleep much, she said. Not since Cade. Cole set the rifle against the barn wall. The night around them was perfectly still now, the way it goes still when a thing has passed through and moved on. The Lien, he said. I want to call that lawyer in Lubbock first thing. I know a man, she said. Roy Aldridge. He helped with Cade's will. He's honest. Call him tomorrow morning. She was quiet. The lamp made a small, warm circle around them both. Somewhere out past the eastern fence, a nighthawk called once and was silent. Cole, she said. Yes. Why are you still here? It was a real question, not suspicious, not testing. The kind of question that is actually asking something else, something that does not have a clean name in the language of practical people. He considered it for a moment with the honesty it deserved. I put work into this place, he said. Into those kids. Into that trough that doesn't leak anymore. He paused. I'm not interested in it being taken from something that doesn't deserve to lose it. She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned and went back to the house. Cole returned to his drop cloth in the barn and lay down and did not sleep again until the sky had begun to lighten in the east, and even then it was the light. Fitful sleep of a man standing guard inside his own dreaming. Roy Aldridge drove out from Lubbock on a Tuesday in a car the color of old mustard, wearing a suit that had been good once and still had the bearing of its former quality. He was 60, bald along the top with white at his temples, with the kind of eyes that read documents the way other men read faces, quickly, for the thing being hidden. He sat at the kitchen table with the deed and the lien side by side and the mortgage letter beside that. And he read all three documents with the thoroughness of a man who understood that speed and justice were frequently enemies. Cole sat at the far end of the table. Nora sat across from Aldridge. Whit and June were outside. Cole had sent them to repile the split firewood along the south wall of the barn. A task that would take them the better part of the morning if Whit cooperated and slightly longer if he didn't. Well, Aldridge said after a long time. Well, Nora said. The provision on the deed is unusual but not unheard of. Dual consent clause on any secondary instrument against the property. He set down the deed. It was put in by your husband's grandfather, I know because I handled an estate matter for the family in 1961 and this deed was referenced. He tapped the lien. Your husband signed this without your knowledge or consent. That's correct. And you were not present. No. Were you notified afterward, in writing or otherwise? No. I found this in the lockbox after the funeral. Aldridge was quiet for a moment. Then my professional opinion, and I'm prepared to put it in writing and stand behind it in front of a judge in this county or any adjacent one, is that this lien is not valid against the primary deed. Your husband did not have sole authority to pledge the property. Gerald Stott received something he was not legally entitled to receive, which makes the lien instrument void ab initio. He looked at her directly. That means void from the beginning. The kitchen was quiet. Through the window, Cole could hear Whit debating something with June in the particular urgent tone of a 6-year-old who has strong feelings about the correct way to stack firewood. He'll fight it, Nora said. He might, Aldridge said. But he won't win it. This clause is clear. And I should tell you, or a lien obtained without proper consent can, in some circumstances, constitute a form of fraud if the holder knew or should have known of the limitation. He folded his hands. Did Gerald Stott know about this clause? Nora looked at Cole. He's from this family, Cole said. He was married into it. He'd have had access to the estate history. Then he likely knew, Aldridge said. Which changes the complexion of the matter considerably. What do I do? Nora asked. 2 things, Aldridge said. First, you bring the primary mortgage current. That removes the trigger for the lien even if we're disputing its validity, it eliminates his argument entirely. He looked at her over the top of his glasses. Is that possible? Nora's mouth tightened. Not easily. Cole said, from his end of the table. What's the number? 2 months past due plus this month's, Nora said. $720. The kitchen absorbed that number. Cole had $43 to his name. He knew Nora had $112 in the coffee can. He had also been keeping rough mental accounts of the value of work he'd done on the property. The trough repair alone had saved the cost of a new one, which ran to $250 at the minimum. But accounts are not cash. Second thing, Aldridge said, watching them both. The deed needs to be formalized in your name alone, going forward. With your husband's death, the joint tenancy dissolves, but I'd like to see it recorded cleanly with the county. He paused. And there's one more thing that would complicate any future legal challenge considerably. He said it carefully, because he was a careful man. He said that if the property had a second named occupant with a legal stake in its upkeep and operation, not a hired hand, but someone whose name could be attached to the land in a formal capacity, it made any predatory claim against it substantially harder to prosecute. The kitchen was very quiet. I'm not suggesting anything indecorous, Aldridge said. A formal partnership agreement would accomplish part of it. A homestead filing with dual names would accomplish more. He paused. A marriage would accomplish it entirely. Cole looked at the table. Nora looked at the window. I'll give you my card, Aldridge said, with the diplomacy of a man who has learned when to stop talking. Call me when you've decided what you'd like to do. But do it within 2 weeks. I want to file the challenge to the lien before Stott's lawyer in Amarillo gets the paperwork moving. He left them the documents, accepted a cup of coffee for the road, and drove away in his mustard-colored car. The following Sunday morning, not because of Aldridge's suggestion, not because of the law, but because of a conversation that happened in the barn at dusk on Friday when Cole was oiling the harness leather and Nora came to lean in the doorway and they talked for the first time about things that were not the ranch, not the children, not the legal situation. They drove to the county seat. They did not make ceremony of it. They told no one in Hatchet Creek beforehand. They took Whit and June, who understood the broad shape of what was happening if not the legal texture of it. And they stood before a justice of the peace in a small office that smelled of pencil shavings and window cleaner. June wore her good dress. Whit wore his good shirt and refused to wear a tie, a position no one argued with. Cole had borrowed a clean shirt from a man at the feed store who was approximately his size, and he returned it the following week, laundered and pressed. It was not romantic in any storybook sense. It was the coming together of two people who had both lost things that could not be returned and had, through some arrangement of the particular and the accidental, found themselves in a position where the thing they had left was worth protecting together. Nora held his hand through the brief words. Her grip was firm. It was the grip of someone who has made a decision and intends to honor it. Gerald Stott received the legal notification of the lien challenge the following Thursday. He called Hedrick in Amarillo, who told him that the dual consent clause was, in fact, a serious problem for their position. Stott said several things that were not fit for public record. Hedrick said that the cost of contesting it would exceed the value of the lien. Given the length of a court fight and the recent change in the deed filing that now reflected a co-ownership with clear community property protections. She married the drifter? Stott said. She married Cole Drennan, Hedrick said. Who, I should tell you, also has a clean record and a prior ownership history that will not look bad to any jury in this county. A pause. My advice is to let it go. Stott let it go. Not happily, and not quietly, he said things in the diner at Riata Crossing that circulated through the usual channels. But the social arithmetic of small towns works in unexpected directions, and what people in Hatchet Creek remembered, once the story came to them in pieces, was not the drifter who appeared at a widow's gate, but the man who had fixed the water trough and taught the boy to drive nails and stood at a barn door in the dark to protect two children from men sent against them in the night. Mrs. Beaumont, to her considerable credit, revised her opinion and conveyed it to several important people over a period of 3 weeks. This accomplished more than any legal filing. In November, the hardware store owner, a man named Pruitt, told Cole that there was credit available for fence materials whenever he needed it. In December, the feed store extended the same courtesy. These were not large gestures. In Hatchet Creek, they were the largest gestures available. There is a particular quality to a West Texas winter morning, when the hard freeze has pulled all the color from the landscape and left it in shades of gray and silver and the washed-out blue of the sky. On such mornings, the world looks like something that has gone entirely to ruin. And then the sun comes, slow, inevitable, indifferent to your assessment of the situation, and puts the color back. Not the same color. A better one, the kind that only comes from having been stripped down and started over. By January, the Duval-Drennan place, as people in town had quietly begun calling it, without fanfare or announcement, was a different kind of operation than it had been in October. The fences held. The trough was full. The barn housed 2 young horses purchased through a careful arrangement with a neighbor who had more stock than pasture. June had begun keeping a record of the ranch's daily work in a composition notebook her mother had given her, in the precise handwriting of a person who intends to be useful. Wick could drive a nail reliably, and had strong opinions about the correct technique. Cole Drennan, who had walked through a broken gate with 47 cents and a split boot sole, who had owned everything and lost it and walked away from the wreckage with only the habit of work and the residual capacity for care that hardship had not quite managed to extinguish, Cole Drennan had a bed indoors, and a deed with his name on it, and 2 children who called for him when they needed something fixed. What he had given Nora, in the end, was not salvation. He had given her a second pair of hands and the specific, irreplaceable presence of someone who chose to stay. What she had given him was harder to name, the chance to put his back to a thing worth keeping, and a house that needed what he had left to offer. Neither of them would have called what they had built a miracle. They were too practical for that word. But in the high grass along the eastern fence in early spring, where the ground had been churned and resettled by the footsteps of men sent against them in the dark, wild flowers came up in a band of yellow and white, stubborn, unremarkable, and absolutely determined. Which is, perhaps, the only kind of miracle that lasts.